Welcome back. Now, addressing socio-economic injustices and changing patriarchal cultural norms would go quite a long way towards decreasing violence against women and girls in South Africa. That's according to research over many years by Professor Deevia Bhana. Now, she's the South African Research Chair in Gender and Childhood Sexuality based at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Professor Bhana joins us now to discuss her findings as the country ends the annual 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence. Prof, thank you so much for your time and good morning to you. Quite an interesting, eye-opening, further thought-provoking research you've conducted, but take me through what it took for you, of course, to conduct this study and how your sort of young girls, your subjects or the students and pupils that you've interviewed and their age groups and what it took to have them.
Thanks very much for having me. And this remains an unending crisis in this country regarding women and girls' vulnerability to sexual and gender violence. Now, my particular focus, as well as the team that I work with, we are engaged with young girls, even those under the age of 10, right to 18, particularly school-going girls and boys. And we're trying to ascertain from girls themselves what are the risk factors, how they see gender violence and what matters to them. And in this particular research, I want to highlight from what girls' own perspectives around ending violence. And because of the constrained circumstances, and this is in relation to socio-economic challenges, the girls in this particular setting, which is an impoverished township setting, see the only hope in relation to education and, of course, fleeing the township context to contexts which they seem, or in their view, as more safe. And these would be the more middle-class areas. So in their narrow view of how gender violence can be addressed, it is certainly through fleeing and escaping the context within which they currently live.
Yeah. And what were particularly the girls' views on sex and relationships?
So there are conflicting views here. On the one hand, we have girls who are and young people more generally invested in relationships, and this is a critical stage in the life course. And these relationships are key to developmental trajectories and goals. And so these girls are invested in relationships. They idealize romance and love and marriage. And yet these are the same relationships in which they find that their power is constrained, that their ability to say no is defined by patriarchal norms and cultural values, that their ability to negotiate safe sex is indeed curtailed by fear of losing a boyfriend.
Yeah, and the notion that sex is dangerous, is a danger to them, where would you say this idea or experience was reinforced from?
So there seems to be a deep connection, an interactive connection between how they view sex as dangerous in terms of their experiences in and around the community, inside their households, within families, their experiences from their relatives, their everyday experience of violence within the community setting, as well as their risk and vulnerability to male violence inside and outside of the school. So this sort of network of through which they experience and navigate everyday life points very deeply to the to how violence is entrenched in everyday life, from the family to the community to the home to schooling.
Yeah. You know what's interesting for me, Prof, is that each time we talk about women escaping violence, we almost put a link between the economical, circumstances and what prohibits them from removing themselves in violent situations. And I just wonder, for these young girls, what do they see as a ticket, as a way to escape the violence that they witness, perhaps either in the township, in the communities, or within their families?
Education remains a key focus in terms of how they see this escape. And I guess what we have to do is understand that, as much as they have such a great deal of investment in education as that hope, including their families, that education, we need to be able to fulfill those goals. Education needs to serve what these girls are investing in it as in terms of realizing their own goals of improving their economic circumstances and escaping the context that they see as debilitating.
I want to talk more about, the further, complexities of the problem beyond just sex. You mentioned class inequality, racial inequality also contribute as some factors to the sort of the complexity of the problem that is gender-based violence in our communities.
So we cannot understand these particular girls. Now, I guess I need to preface this by saying that violence is not simply an issue around socioeconomic inequalities. Even in the richest of homes, in the most privileged of contexts, the experiences of domestic violence and other sorts of violence. But the scale in which these girls experience violence is the problem, and they are directly related to our histories. And so that these girls are situated in a township is not simply a matter of fact. It is historically situated, in which under apartheid, during colonialism, and these histories combine to produce these vulnerabilities for these girls as Black working class girls in impoverished contexts, facing deep poverty and unemployment. Despite the changes made in this country, they remain remnants and deep remnants of the past that impact upon how girls experience their lives.
Yeah. And what about the notion, Prof, of also challenging patriarchal norms in this country and in most of our communities as well?
That remains one of the key interventions in terms of changing those ideologies in which both women and girls and men understand their roles in terms of patriarchal values, in terms of women's subordinate role, the expectation of a male provider role, the expectation that men are initiators of sex, the idea that women remain and girls should be docile, passive, and sexually respectable. These sort of values are also dissected through religious and cultural norms. And these all intersect to produce a complexity around patriarchy. And we are expected, and we must disentangle all of these complexities in order to get to the root of the problem.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your time, Professor Deevia Bhana, for joining me this morning. Quite a thought-provoking conversation with the professor from the University of KwaZulu-Natal.